You woke up today and for 1 second, you did not recognize yourself. Not in a dramatic way. Not with tears on the pillow or some obvious disaster waiting at the edge of the bed. It was quieter than that. You opened your eyes, reached for your phone, saw the same room, the same ceiling, the same life waiting for you, and something inside you whispered, "This does not feel like me anymore." Everything feels strange before the turning point, and there is a reason for that. I know how unsettling it is when nothing has visibly fallen apart, but you still feel as if you are standing outside your own life, watching someone else keep your schedule. You still answer messages. You still say, "I'm good," before your body has even decided if that is true. You still check your phone without wanting anything from it, just to avoid sitting alone with the feeling underneath the noise. You walk past mirrors a little faster. You hear your own voice in conversations and wonder when it started sounding rehearsed. People keep responding to the version of you they recognize, and you keep performing her because interrupting the performance would require explaining something you do not have language for yet. How do you tell someone that your life is still functioning, but you are no longer fitting inside it? Why do you keep trying to recognize yourself in who you were, when the strangeness you feel is the proof that you are no longer that person? That question may not feel gentle. I know, but I am not asking it to push you. I am asking it because I remember what it feels like to mistake the beginning of becoming for something breaking. I remember trying to fix my routine when the real problem was that the person who built that routine had already started fading. There is something I need to tell you about this strangeness you are feeling, but not yet. For now, just stay with this. The feeling has a name, even if you have not found it. It is not weakness. It is not ingratitude. It is not you being too sensitive, too restless, or too difficult to satisfy. By the end of this, you will understand what this unfamiliar space is really asking from you. But before we get there, I need to ask you something that maybe no one has asked yet. Before I ask you to change anything, I need you to understand this part clearly. What you are feeling is real. It is not a mood. It is not a lack of gratitude. It is not a private failure you need to cover with better discipline, better sleep, or another list of things to improve. I know you may have tried to explain it away. Maybe you told yourself everyone feels tired. Maybe you blamed the season, the workload, your hormones, your habits, your phone, your inability to rest properly. But deep down, you know the tiredness began before the day even started. You wake up already bracing. You move through the morning like someone carrying a secret under her skin. And the secret is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like silence. You stop telling people how you really are because the answer would take too long, and you are not sure they would know what to do with it. You say you are fine because fine is convenient. You keep showing up to places where everyone expects the familiar version of you, and for a while, that expectation feels easier than honesty. The job you once prayed for now feels strangely hollow. The relationship that once gave you comfort now asks for a shape of affection you no longer know how to offer. The habits that once made you feel organized now feel like small cages with pretty labels on them. You open the Notes app, type one sentence, delete it, and lock the screen. You sit in the car a few extra minutes after arriving home because entering the house means becoming expected again. Nothing is necessarily bad enough to justify leaving, changing, disappointing, or admitting the sentence you are afraid to say. Something in me is done here. I think about Mariana, 34, who had a life people described as stable. She had a decent job in an office with glass doors and cold coffee by 10 in the morning. She had a partner who was kind enough that leaving would sound cruel, a routine that looked healthy enough that questioning it would sound spoiled, and a family that loved the part of her who always managed. Then one Tuesday, while brushing her teeth before work, she looked at herself and felt a quiet certainty pass through her body. Something ended. Not the relationship exactly. Not the job exactly. Not the city, the apartment, the friendships, the calendar. Something underneath all of it. She rinsed her mouth, dried her face, went to work, answered emails, laughed at the right moments, bought groceries after 5, and told no one. At night, she watched a show she did not care about, beside someone she did not hate, in a room she had helped decorate, with a life that looked almost beautiful from the outside. Then she kept doing that for 2 years. That is how the old self survives past its expiration date. Not because you are weak, but because the system around you rewarded her. People praised her patience. They depended on her emotional availability. They trusted her predictability. They called her strong when she abandoned herself quietly, and responsible when she postponed the truth. So now, when change rises, it feels like betrayal. You think, not yet, because someone needs me. Not yet, because I should be more certain. Not yet, because what if I destroy something I cannot rebuild? And under all of that, there is a quieter fear. If I stop being useful in this way, will I still be loved? But sometimes, not yet is not wisdom. Sometimes it is resistance wearing the clothes of responsibility, and carrying a version of yourself that is no longer accurate becomes its own kind of exhaustion. What if the problem is not that you are lost, but that you are trying to find something that no longer exists? Maybe the most painful possibility is not that you are lost. Maybe you are standing inside the remains of an identity that already ended, trying to rebuild it only because it is familiar, not because it still fits, not because it still feeds your spirit, not because it still tells the truth about who you are now, but because you know how to operate inside it. You know how to be useful there. You know how to be praised there. You know how to disappear there without making anyone uncomfortable, and that is why this stage can feel so confusing. The discomfort is not always a sign that you are collapsing. Sometimes it is the sound of two selves rubbing against each other inside the same life. One self knows how to survive by keeping things calm, predictable, explainable. The other self is beginning to ask for something more honest than survival. One says, "Do not disturb what people already understand." The other says, "I cannot keep abandoning myself just to remain recognizable." That friction is what you have been calling confusion. But confusion is not always the absence of direction. Sometimes it is the first honest response to a life that has become too small for what is awakening in you. Most people miss this because delay can sound very mature. It can sound responsible. It can sound like wisdom. You tell yourself you need more time, but you have already had the same thought in the shower, in the car, while folding laundry, while pretending to listen in conversations, while lying beside someone and feeling miles away from your own body. You tell yourself you need certainty, but certainty is not what you are waiting for. Permission is. You are waiting for a version of change that does not disappoint anyone, does not rearrange anything, does not make you grieve, does not ask you to become unfamiliar for a while. And I understand that. I know what it is to confuse fear with patience. I know what it is to say, "I am just being careful," when the deeper sentence is, "I am scared of what I already know." But there is a difference between real wisdom and fear wearing elegant clothes. Wisdom makes space for truth. Fear keeps asking truth to come back later. Wisdom listens to the body, the pattern, the repeated inner knowing. Fear keeps collecting evidence for a life that has already stopped feeling alive. You are not failing because you cannot settle. You are unsettled because something in you refuses to keep calling self-betrayal stability. We were taught that strangeness means danger. We were taught that peace should feel like recognizing ourselves immediately, like looking in the mirror and seeing the same person everyone else still expects. We were taught that if something is right, it should feel clean, obvious, and easy to explain. But real becoming often feels unclear at first because it has not yet built a language around itself. You feel the ending before you understand the beginning. You feel the distance before you know where you are going. You feel the old habits lose their power before you have new rituals to replace them. So I want you to stop here, not to fix anything, but to look directly at the pattern. Which part of your current routine are you maintaining only because it once made sense, not because it still does? Once you identify that part, what would you have to admit if you stopped maintaining it? And if you admitted that fully, what would it reveal about the person you are becoming that you are still afraid to name? These questions are not here to pressure you. They are here to remove the fog from what your body has been trying to say in quieter ways. Because the truth does not always arrive as a sentence. Sometimes it arrives as exhaustion after doing something that used to energize you. Sometimes it arrives as silence, where excitement used to be. Sometimes it arrives as a deep inner, know that you keep translating into maybe later. So let me ask you again, with the weight it deserves now. Why do you keep trying to recognize yourself in who you were, when the strangeness you feel is the proof that you are no longer that person? This is where the belief breaks. This is where you stop treating your own transformation like an emergency. You are not fighting uncertainty. You are fighting evidence. Evidence that the old structure cannot hold the person emerging through you. Evidence that the life you built may have been necessary for a season, but not sacred forever. Evidence that the version of you who kept everything together may have saved you once, but she was never meant to be your final form. And when you finally see that, something inside you loosens. Not because all the answers arrive. They will not yet. But because you stop demanding that the future prove itself before you release the past. You stop trying to feel safe inside what has already expired. You stop defending what ended just because it once protected you. You do not need to know exactly what comes next. You only need to stop protecting what no longer belongs in your future. Now breathe for a moment. I do not want to rush you from recognition into action as if your inner life is a project that needs to be fixed by tonight. Something tender happens after the belief breaks. At first, it may not feel like courage. It may feel like quiet, like the room inside you gets a little wider, like the pressure to explain everything immediately loses some of its grip. You may still be afraid, but fear is no longer the only voice in the room. There is another voice now, smaller, calmer, less interested in performing certainty. It does not demand that you destroy your whole life to prove you are changing. It only asks you to stop lying to yourself in the places where the truth has already become impossible to ignore. And maybe that is the first real shift. Not a dramatic decision, not a perfect plan. Just the moment you stop treating your own becoming like something you need to apologize for. This is what begins to change when resistance falls. Not everything outside you rearranges overnight. The same messages may still arrive. The same dishes may still be in the sink. The same calendar may still be waiting with names, deadlines, expectations, and roles attached to it. But something inside you moves differently through the same day. You answer one question without calculating which version of you will be easiest for others to accept. You wake up and do not need 5 minutes of convincing yourself that you are okay before your feet touch the floor. You notice that the silence you used to fear is not empty anymore. It is giving you information. You start catching yourself before you say yes from guilt. You pause before explaining away your own discomfort. You feel the strange relief of not needing to betray what you know just to keep the room comfortable. A door inside you, one you thought was locked, was not locked at all. It was only blocked by years of over-explaining, over-giving, over-adjusting, and calling it love. Then slowly, not perfectly, something unclenches, and for the first time, the edge you are standing on does not feel only like an ending. It begins to feel like an opening. There is a kind of fear that calls itself maturity. It says, I need certainty before I move. It says, I should wait until this makes sense to everyone. It says, I cannot trust this yet because I cannot explain it cleanly. But real wisdom sounds different. Real wisdom says, I already know, and I am afraid to know. That sentence is quieter, but it is more honest. It does not pressure you into chaos. It does not ask you to become reckless. It only removes the costume from delay. The snake does not argue with its old skin when it is time to shed. It does not ask the old skin to approve the next shape. It does not drag what has already dried out into the next season out of loyalty. It simply leaves what can no longer expand. And maybe this is where you stop asking your former self to bless the person you are becoming. Maybe this is where you stop mistaking resistance for protection. Maybe this is where you realize that fighting the process never made it safer. It only made it longer. The old skin may have protected you once. It may have helped you survive a season when being agreeable, quiet, useful, predictable, or endlessly understanding felt necessary. But protection becomes confinement when you keep wearing it after it stops expanding with you. And once that lands, the next step does not need to be enormous. It may be one honest sentence spoken without apology, one message you do not answer from guilt, one plan you cancel because your body has been saying no for weeks, one morning where you let yourself want something different without immediately building a case against it, one conversation where you do not soften the truth until it becomes harmless. That is how the new self begins to take root, not through a grand announcement, but through small refusals to keep betraying what you already know. You do not have to burn everything down to stop living like the old version is still in charge. You begin by telling the truth in places where you used to perform peace. You begin by letting discomfort become information instead of punishment. You begin by noticing which doors open when you stop begging closed rooms to feel like home. And then the edge becomes clearer. It is not here to destroy you. It is here to separate what shaped you from what can still carry you. You are at the edge. I know you feel it. And now I am going to tell you what that edge is asking from you. I know where you are. I know what you have been carrying. Not because your story is identical to mine, but because there is a moment that appears in almost every real transformation. A moment when the old life still exists, but your attachment to it starts loosening. A moment when you realize that the exhaustion was never coming only from circumstances. It was coming from the effort of maintaining a version of yourself that no longer reflected the truth. That is why everything felt strange. That is why familiar places stopped feeling familiar. That is why you could not find relief by organizing, optimizing, fixing, or understanding your way out of it. The discomfort was never the problem. The discomfort was the evidence. Evidence that something real was trying to emerge beneath everything you had learned to perform. And the more you tried to return to who you were, the more exhausted you became, because life was no longer asking you to return. It was asking you to continue. Most people spend years negotiating with endings. They keep one foot in the past and one foot in the future, hoping the tension between them will eventually disappear on its own. But it never does, because the purpose of that tension is not comfort. It is revelation. It is showing you exactly where you are still clinging to an identity that has completed its work. The person you were is not your enemy. Respect her. Honor her. Thank her. She carried you through seasons you may not have survived otherwise. She learned how to adapt. She learned how to endure. She learned how to protect what mattered when protection was necessary. But survival identities are not meant to become permanent homes. They are bridges, and bridges are meant to be crossed. Not worshipped, not lived on forever. Crossed. That is why the edge feels so sacred, because the edge is the place where gratitude and release finally meet each other. Listen carefully now. You do not need permission. You do not need unanimous approval. You do not need everyone to understand. You do not need certainty before the first step. You do not need a guarantee that every choice will work perfectly. What you need is honesty. Honest enough to admit what no longer fits. Honest enough to stop calling fear wisdom. Honest enough to recognize what your soul has been whispering beneath the noise. This is the thing I could not tell you at the beginning. The thing hidden inside the strangeness. The thing waiting beneath every moment of quiet discomfort. You are not standing in the ruins of your life. You are standing at the entrance of it. And that changes everything. Because suddenly the unfamiliar feeling is no longer proof of loss. It is proof of arrival, proof of movement, proof of becoming. And here is where the circle closes. You are not losing yourself. You are finally stopping the performance of who you used to be. If this touched something in you, tell me, because I want to keep walking this path with you. If these words found you at exactly the moment you needed them, stay here. There is more ahead. Follow me here. And before you go, when the screen fades and the silence returns, do not rush to distract yourself. Stay with the question for a moment. Let it follow you into the rest of your day. What in you is still waiting for permission to exist?